And so today's focus is on worry. I think many of us can attest that we worry at some point or another, but they're also, if you're like me, you know that it's more than just typical worry. You maybe tend to be a more anxious person. And so it's not uncommon that anxiety and worry can go hand in hand. It's a common issue that I think can plague many of us, and it's maybe hard to talk about, or we just accept that this is the norm, that your mind just worries all the time, and really you might not even notice, but it is adding to your anxiousness, your stress level. So let's take a deeper dive. What is worry? Worrying is it's survival. It's a concept, it's something we do, and it has to do with survival. So when we worry, oftentimes we are perceiving some kind of threat, problem, or concern that the mind or the body is recognizing. So for example, long ago, way back, let's say just like in our hunter-gatherer days, when the first human beings were on Earth, and they had to legitimately worry about where and when is the next food source coming. Okay, so we know that food was not readily available in grocery stores to just go pick up, or the food market, or whatever. So worrying is a mechanism that helps us bring our mind's attention to a problem. So problem, food supply is running low. This worry, this thought, brings attention to that problem. Oh my goodness, I'm worried that I might not be able to feed my family because food supply is running low. So back in those days, oftentimes the perceived threat, risk, problem, or concern was very real. It was really very legitimate, and you knew that you needed food for survival. So at that point, worry is prompting us to create a plan to prepare for that problem. So as soon as we notice that food supply is running low, we can start to prepare, okay, what am I going to do? When am I going to go out and hunt next, or gather food or berries? Who's going to, watch my children while I go and do that? Who do I trust, of these people maybe that you're around or with? Or if you don't have anybody, the kids are coming with. What are they going to do? So just think how, in simple terms, back in the day, when there was a problem, worry prompted our ancestors to plan and prepare for that. And to be honest, oftentimes at that point, then you'd stop once you have a plan in place and you'd execute the plan. So if you planned to go hunting in a few hours, or when the sun was going down or up or whatnot, you'd execute the plan. You'd go figure out how you were going to get food, and you'd get it. And then it would be over. The worrying's done because you planned, you prepped, and then you let it go. And when the time came to do the plan, you did it. So I know that that seems really simple and basic, but I want you to know that ultimately our brain does have a reason that we worry. It's survival. If our brain perceives that there's some kind of threat, problem, or concern, it wants to fix it or solve it, or at least prepare and plan for it. Okay. I say all of that because I think oftentimes worry can get a bad rap. Like, don't worry. Actually, that's like a very common phrase, right? Like if we know somebody in our life that worries a lot, a well-meaning individual might say, oh, just don't worry about that. Well, don't worry is really hard, especially when you're stuck in worry mode. So today's webinar is going to actually go over a proven process that actually works when you're stuck in worry, and it's not as easy as just don't worry. Worry does have a purpose, so go easy on yourself. There's a reason why you can get stuck there, because we end up there sometimes with the best intentions, and it just doesn't stop. So something I want you to think about at this part is, how often do you worry? Do you feel like, if you're watching this webinar, there's a likely chance that you feel like you maybe worry a lot. You maybe catch yourself in worry, or maybe you don't worry that much, but when you do kick into worry mode, it goes like on overload. Okay, so Just start thinking, how often do you catch yourself worrying? And what are you worrying about? Okay, so part one of the series is talking about how can you worry with purpose? So, like I said, worry has its own purpose. And so instead of trying to fight it and resist it and stop worrying, I want you to think of worrying as a signal to go through this process. Now, I have a picture of it here and we'll talk through the steps, but I also want you to know, as part of the webinar, one of the resources that you're getting is this step-by-step worksheet and plan, which is going to have these steps on it. But then it also has a copy of a blank one so that you can actually work through it as many times as you want. Ultimately, you might find that you print kind of the third page of the worry handout that you're receiving, and you print and make copies of the third page just because it's what you're going to use to prompt you through this process when you catch yourself worrying. You might find that you maybe just jot these steps here down on a Post-it note, keep one at your desk, keep one in the house, wherever you tend to worry at home, maybe next to your bed. You could also write these prompts in just if you have a journal or notebook at home, just to cue you to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm worrying, I'm getting stuck, I got to do this. So let's talk through the worry with purpose steps. I want you to consider that oftentimes worrying can be anxiety provoking and or overwhelming because you're often doing it and you're storing it all up here. Okay, all up in your brain, all up in your mind. And I want you to think, how many other things do you hold up there? Okay. In this day and age, we are being inundated with new pieces of information 24/7, it feels like. Our brain has to hold so much, whether it's even just from what we think is like mindless scrolling on Instagram or Reddit or Facebook or whatever news app you follow. Again, it's intaking information, even just as you scroll through the titles or the pictures or the captions. Our brain's intaking a bunch of information at work or even at home. Everywhere we go, there's little notifications, a text for this, a calendar reminder for that. And then you start worrying about problems and concerns, and oh my goodness, it can feel like it's going to explode up there. So step one of this process is to really narrow down, what are you worrying about? And I really do encourage you, yes, could you go through these steps kind of in your head? Of course, but as I just mentioned, you have a lot going on up in your head. So I recommend grab a pen and paper or use the worksheet when you print it off, or pull up a Word document on your computer and type, whatever you prefer, and write down everything. What are you worrying about? So if there's a lot up there, you might want to do a brain dump. And a brain dump is really just getting out everything, not even just worries, but just what is going on up here. Maybe you have the song, a popular kid song stuck in your head. I don't know. But either way, the goal here is to get it out onto paper. And then in this step one here, you're really trying to decipher, what is it that you're really worrying about? Now, it's best if you can complete this process that we're going to go through here, one worry at a time. Okay. So let's just say you're worrying about, I don't know, maybe like the health of a loved one, and you're worrying about, did my son get his homework done on time? Whatever it is you find up there, I want you to try to choose just one specific worry or concern and take that through the process. And then if you need to, do this process for some of the other worries and concerns. Okay. Once you've got that, spell it out very clear. What is it that you're worrying about? Step two, create a plan. For this part to help and to work, you need to be really honest with yourself. That thing that you're worrying about, that problem, concern, issue, whatever it is, you need to be honest and realistic in this step two. what is in your control and what is not in your control. That can really help you when you're stuck in worrying, because quite frankly, oftentimes we might find that we're worrying about things that are outside of our control. So you got something coming up this weekend, something you're excited for, and you're wondering if the weather's going to cooperate. I hate to say it, it's a waste of time. You can't control the weather. I can't control the weather. Worrying about what the weather's going to do isn't going to help. You can prepare. That's what I mean. So you write down, let's say that you are worrying about some event that's happening this weekend that somehow may be dependent on good weather. And you find yourself worrying about the weather, but you can't control the weather. But if you're doing this worksheet, what can you control? Well, you can control maybe weather-related clothing, gear, and whatever you might need to be prepared to do whatever it is you're doing this weekend. So in this hypothetical, you have a outdoor picnic coming up. You can't control if it's going to rain or not, but you can bring an umbrella. You can encourage everyone else to bring an umbrella. You can control having a backup plan, having a backup place that you're going to meet your friends for lunch. So that's what I mean in step 2, is that you take a look at the problem, concern, or issue, and you ask yourself, what is outside of my control? And what can I control? What can I do to help prepare? Now, let's say for that thing, that problem that you have, there's a bunch of things that are in your control. I could, switch my work shift. I could get to sleep earlier. Whatever it is, you come up with all the things that are in your control. The other thing I want you to do is look at that list of items, and you have to be realistic with yourself. So part of creating a plan and preparing means being realistic. So again, we're just going to go with the example of, let's say you have something coming up this weekend, you're worrying about it, and you realize, okay, well, I can at least, make sure I have what I need packed. I can make sure that I have a backup location secured. I don't know. So let's say you come up with 10 items. You're looking at those 10 items now, and you're asking yourself, is it realistic for me to get all of this done in the next however many days you have until that thing happens? So for step 2 to really work, it can be really helpful for you, whether you actually have a planner or a calendar out, or just on a piece of paper, write down, if it's Sunday, the thing happens on Friday, write down Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then take that list of items that you have control over, and you start actually planning in, well, when will I do this? I can pack the bag, the Friday night before, so that I'm not scrambling Saturday morning. I can text Susie to see if I can host it at her house, because she's got a bigger house. So I'll text her on Tuesday to see if we could go to her house for the lunch if it rains. But do you see what I'm saying? So not only are we taking the list of items that are in your control, but instead of just swirling them around and thinking oh my gosh, when am I going to get this all done? You're taking that extra step to actually plan in, when will I get this done this week? And if you notice that there's just not enough hours or time in the week or in the day, you're going to delegate, or you're going to just take something off the list. Okay. You are not superhuman. You don't need to fall apart because you're trying to fit everything in. So be realistic with yourself. What can you get done on this task list, and when? What might you need to delegate or ask someone else to do? Or what might you need to just simply cross off the list? So step 2 is a lot, which is why you have kind of the worksheet to work through that. But that's what I mean when I say you can prepare, create a plan, and really dive into what's in your control, what's not. So that by the time you get to step 3, you really feel like you can just leave it be, because you've created a plan. You know what your priority is and what you want to get done. You know that you've delegated XYZ to your husband and he's going to help out. You know that you're going to ask your kids to help out with 1, 2, 3. You've created the plan. Now I need you to execute the plan as the time comes. But in this moment where you're stuck worrying, I need you to let it go now. I need you to leave it be. Continuing to worry and ruminate about this issue helps no one. And most of all, it doesn't help you. It continues to kick in feelings of overwhelm, anxiousness, stress, whatever that is. So at this point, you are intentionally getting off the worry channel. And for some of you, that might be enough. Going through steps 1, 2, and 3, you're like, good, I'm good. I can leave it be now. I just needed a system to get this worry or concern or problem out of my head. I needed kind of a systematic approach to tackle it, to see what I can do. And I'm good. Like, I am off the worry channel. I'm good to go. Some of you, it's not that easy. Okay. So you try really hard to leave it be. But you notice that your thoughts keep going back to, oh my gosh, this weekend, what am I going to do? How am I going to get this done? The weather. So again, you're finding yourself still worrying about things in your control that you already have a plan for, or you're worrying about things that are outside your control, which again, not helpful. Okay. That's where, especially maybe for things that are outside of your control, things that you cannot change. Some people suggest scheduling a worry time, a time to worry. So you maybe give your mind 15 minutes a day, maybe at the end of the day, to worry about everything, including the stuff you can't control. But then you stop. So maybe you schedule that time in. However, today we're going to focus on other tools to get off the worry channel. How do we do it? Okay. So if you've made it to this part in the webinar, I assume that you can sometimes get stuck on the worry channel. I could too. Okay. So here's some general ideas. Practice a mindfulness meditation. Do some mindful movement instead. Go talk to someone. Go spend some time with a loved one. Go do a leisure activity, something you love. Go color, go out and garden, go bake a cake. Maybe get lost in a work project. So maybe there is a work project or something that you're kind of working on, and at least instead of staying on the worry channel, go check off a couple to-do items somewhere else. Help your brain feel accomplished, task completed. Go fold the laundry. Do some kind of grounding body technique. Even just practicing like neutral and acceptance, practicing really experiencing those emotions of, I'm trying to accept what I cannot control. But notice how when you try to shift into acceptance, it's at least partially helping you get off the worry channel because you're focusing on acceptance. Or as I mentioned, go vacuum or clean the house. So now these are some ideas. And let's break that down a little bit. So if your mind tends to get stuck on worry, on thinking about worrying, the worry channel, whatever you want to call it, here's sort of 2 different trains of approaches that I often talk about on how you can stop the worry, how you can kind of approach stress, anxiety, etc. So we have our mind-based approaches. Oftentimes, these approaches are going specifically after what is our brain thinking, our thoughts, mind-based approaches. So you're trying to think about something else. So maybe you practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is really just being present and in the moment. When you're worrying, you're likely worrying about the past or the future. So when you intentionally try to practice mindfulness, you're trying to just be present in this moment. Or maybe another mind-based approach is oftentimes meditation. There's so many different types of meditation, but so that's another way. Reading a book, maybe listening to a podcast, writing in a gratitude journal, prayer. All of these approaches you're basically trying to sub out thoughts, so instead of thinking about the worry, you're trying to sub it out for the podcast you're listening to, the book you're reading, again, your gratitude journal, all of that. But notice how that's why I call these mind-based approaches. So that's one way to get off the worry channel. Another way is using body-based tools. Now, I found that I tend to gravitate towards body-based tools, and as part of my training and the different classes that I've taken as an occupational therapist, but then also different things I explore just to help be a better coach for you is, of course, I have worked on the mind-based tools and I'm getting better. But you likely will find that one of these approaches you maybe tend to gravitate towards more or is maybe easier for you. So when I say body-based approaches to get off of the worry channel, I mean you're going to try to get out of your head. So it's not so much that you're even thinking about thoughts, if that makes sense. You're not trying to really think of or sub out different thoughts. It's an approach that I like to call like you're getting into your body, you're grounding, you're going inward. Okay, so we're not thinking about our thoughts as much as we're actually thinking about our body now. So strategies here include exercise, going for a walk or run, swimming, dancing, doing some kind of grounding body technique, which would include like lifting weights, a chair push-up, yoga. So there's a whole separate webinar that I have on different body-based stress reduction techniques that you can easily fit into your workday or home life. So go check that out if that's something you're interested in or need more ideas. Go garden, unload the dishwasher, but notice how like you're trying to get off the worry channel because you're gonna go do something with your body. Okay, so that like when you're gardening, you're digging in the earth and you're like experiencing the garden with your body. Okay, so again, and some of these techniques can blend. They're a little bit of both, but I just want you to know what I generally mean when I say you can try some of these different approaches here, mind-based or body-based, as ways to get off the worry channel. So if you're on step 4 of that worksheet where you've thought about what you're worrying about, you've created the plan, you've tried to leave it be, and you're still going back to the worry, that's where I want you to think about, okay, which one of these tools that I'm talking about here could you use to get off the worry channel? So now these are some general tips to help you, again, when you're stuck in worry. And oftentimes worry and anxiety are very synonymous. You know, worrying is usually the process of what's happening up here in the mind and the thoughts. Anxiety is often like the feeling that your body's feeling when you're worrying. So these tips kind of come from one of my certifications that I have, which is an anxiety management specialist. So hang around for some of these tips that might help you when you're trying to get off the worry channel. Focusing on what is very important. So as I mentioned, worrying often is going to take you back into the future, or sorry, that didn't make sense, back to the past, or you're worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. So a really effective way to counteract that is focusing on what is. So when you're in the what if game, what if this happens? What if I had done this differently? What if? And assuming you've gone through steps 1 and 2 from earlier, meaning you've sort of thought of the problem and you have planned or prepped or prepared for what you maybe could have done differently. So you've done those 2 steps. You feel like you've got that covered, but you're still in the what if game. I want you to put yourself into the what is game. What is right now? Well, what if it rains? Well, it is sunny outside. What if everyone is laughing at me? Well, right now, no one's laughing at me. I'm sitting alone in my room. But you get what I'm saying. You practice. The game is what is right now. What can I see? I see the brown door. I see a white notepad. I see a fan. What do you hear? What is? What are you hearing right now? I could hear earlier, at least the snow on the window, but you get the picture. So make that flip. What is? Recognize that when your mind goes into autopilot or that worry mode, And know that it does, um, especially if you tend to be a worrier. Remind yourself it's a habit. This is something that's been a habit for me for a very long time. I need you to gently remind yourself of that versus kicking yourself when you catch yourself in worry. Instead, just gently remind yourself, okay, this is an old habit or pattern. I do easily get stuck here, but I'm working on it. You also might have to remind your body, just because I'm worrying about this doesn't mean there's actually any new risk or danger. So if it's something that you've already worked out with your worry worksheet or those journaling prompts, sometimes just notice that you're worrying about that same issue and say, hey, I'm good. I've already taken care of this. I've planned, I've prepped. There is no new risk or danger to me or my body. So just gently remind yourself of that and come back to the present, come back to what is. Some other helpful tools is thinking about pulling in other senses when you're trying to get off the worry channel. So if you're having a hard time getting into one of the approaches that I mentioned, you're having a hard time, practicing mindfulness or breathing, you're struggling to, get into your exercise routine that you're trying, I want you to pull in your other senses. So pull in music, turn on a good playlist. Okay, that can oftentimes really help you get off the worry channel and help shift you into a happier vibe. Maybe have some positive visual imagery. So again, something you can see that's going to motivate you. And I want you to remember too, when it comes to positive, maybe a positive quote, image, something, if you're making yourself a little sign, instead of saying, don't worry, I want you to remember our brain is not always the best at hearing the no or the don't. So instead, because if you see don't worry, to be honest, oftentimes your brain just starts worrying. So instead, maybe you create a little sign for yourself that says, just breathe. Or maybe it says, go do something else. Okay. Like I want you to think about, what are you trying to get your mind focused on instead of worrying? But anyways, having some kind of sign, visual imagery, something that's going to help you get off the worry channel, but pulling in those other senses can help. Learning to accept the anxious feeling. Again, leaning into acceptance is going to help you decrease the intensity of your anxiousness. So whether you just tend to be an anxious person, or you find yourself anxious right now, or you maybe have kind of full-blown anxiety and you know that about yourself. Either way, we can decrease the intensity of that feeling by counteracting it with acceptance. I accept that I feel a little bit anxious, but I have tools, I have strategies, I have things that I can try. And when we lean into that feeling of acceptance, it can 100% bring down the intensity of that emotion. What you'll find, so I really strongly encourage you that you really try some different tools, go through the worksheet and then try different mind-based approaches, body-based approaches to get off of the worry channel, because you'll notice that ultimately that worrying, anxious experience doesn't happen as often. Or when it does happen, it's much less intense. It doesn't feel so intense for you because you have some tools you can shift into. Or you might find that you catch yourself worrying sooner, so you can stop it. Or you can turn it into something productive. And ultimately, the goal is help you move forward in life, help you move on to the next thing, help you get through your day. So it's not being, just full of worry. That's no fun. Now, if you're still on, you might be wondering, what if this doesn't work? I bought this webinar. I haven't heard anything mind-blowing. These things seem so simple. Maybe I'm willing to try it, but what if? Your brain is already going to worrying, what if this doesn't work? But you know what? It's because your brain is used to worrying. So I know that the strategies in this webinar can work, but you will have to practice them intentionally, consistently, even if it's just for a minute or two when you notice yourself worrying. So it will take time. But notice that I want you to start being kinder with yourself and your mind when you're worrying. But also notice that at the end of this, if you're like, what if this doesn't work? And you're worrying if this will work, is remind yourself it's a habit. And then also remind yourself your brain can totally change. The brain has neuroplasticity, which means that it can absolutely learn new thoughts and create new pathways and strengthen new brain pathways, which can actually help us extinguish old thoughts and old pathways. Okay, so just because you've always had an anxious mind does not mean that's where you have to stay forever. Okay, when you intentionally think about acceptance, you think about how can I control this, you walk yourself through the process of, oh, I'm worrying, I'm going to do the journaling prompts, and then I'm going to get off the worry channel. The more often you do those things, the more often you're strengthening and building new brain pathways. So it will get easier. Okay, you can rewire your anxious worry brain with time and practice. I want you to think about it's the survival of the busiest. So whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're giving the most attention and time to, that's where your mind stays. So if you find yourself in worry, instead of worrying about worry, which literally just strengthens those pathways of worrying, etch that new brain pathway, okay? So bring awareness, gently direct your thoughts, your mind, body to something else. So either the productive worry worksheet, and once you get done with that, practice noticing when you're worrying again and do something to get you off the worry channel. But either way, all of that intentional practice is going to be better because you're then etching in those new brain pathways. Here's some other additional worry resources. So like I said, worry and anxiousness can go hand in hand. So you might enjoy the book by Catherine Pittman. She was also the author or the presenter for the anxiety management course that I took. But it's called Rewire Your Anxious Brain. And also, if you're a visual person, Karen, and I'm not going to pronounce her name right, Salmonson, she creates some beautiful visual books that often have just simple, quick phrases, meditations, quotes in them. So I have a copy of her book, the Instant Happy one. This one's Instant Calm. Either way, it's nice because there's kind of some type of usually positive quote or phrase or meditation with like a nice visual. So that can be helpful for me. So that's another one that you might enjoy. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate that you are